Quiet Strength, Chapter 10. We really believed as we headed into the 1997 off-season that we were close to reaching the level of success we had been striving to achieve. Even though our 1996 record was 6-10, we had finished the season strong and felt good about our defense. And our offense had shown an ability to control the ball and pound it ahead with our running game. However, we were in dire need of offensive playmakers. We still had trouble making big, momentum-changing plays. Heading into the 1997 draft, we held 2 first-round picks. San Diego had traded the second one to us from the 1996 draft. With our 2 picks, we were focused on getting a receiver with great speed and a running back who could hit home runs. We believed this combination would give us some offensive threats to stretch opposing defenses. During the offseason, heading towards the draft, Derek Brooks became a regular visitor to my office. Derek was the outside linebacker drafted by the Bucs in 1995. Each day, his message was the same. The Bucs needed to draft his college teammate, Warwick Dunn, the running back from Florida State. Over and over again, Derek came by with that same advice. At the end of February, the assistant coaches and I headed to the NFL Scouting Combine, which had moved from New Orleans to Indianapolis, to meet some of the college seniors, including Warwick Dunn. I came away from our initial meeting highly impressed. I was around him for only about 20 minutes, but I left with the feeling that this guy could be something really special in the league. Coach Knoll had always said to err on the side of production over looks, and Warwick certainly put that philosophy to the test. At only 5'9" and 180 pounds, Warwick was small for Florida State, let alone the pros. I double-checked my impressions with Bobby Bowden, FSU's head coach since 1976. Coach Bowden told me that despite his size, Warwick was the best player he'd ever coached at Florida State. Coming from Coach Bowden, that was quite a statement. As we deliberated the pick, I continued to think about my training under Coach Knoll. Watch the film, not the stopwatch, he used to say. After all, the point is to select athletes to play football. Some guys test well, either with their foot speed, leaping ability, strength, or other measurable physical traits. But some guys just play well. If given a choice, I'd rather select the guy who did both, of course. But I didn't want to discount a great college player simply because he had suspect physical traits, especially if the guy played high-level competition well. Warwick fit that profile. He was small, but he had been highly successful at SFU, playing in the tough Atlantic Coast Conference. Conventional wisdom said small running backs could not hold up in the NFL, but I was inclined to follow Coach Knoll's advice and go with production over size. Rich McKay, Jerry Angelo, and Tim Ruskell all agreed with this approach. The year prior to my arrival, the Bucs had selected Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. Both players had some physical question marks, but both had performed exceptionally well in college and were off to a good start in the NFL. Rich was focused primarily on not missing with our picks, as some former Bucs teams had done. He believed we could minimize our risk by focusing on a player's production against top competition. Warwick Dunn had made many big plays for the Seminoles, and we desperately needed such a playmaker. In addition, Warwick was the kind of guy who would do other things that might not always be noticed by the fans. He picked up blitzes without fear, even if it meant blocking much bigger players. He had soft hands and caught the ball well coming out of the backfield. And if his quarterback threw an interception, he always hustled to get into the play and make the tackle. We didn't know whether Warwick could hold up physically for an entire season as the every-down running back, but he believed he could. In the meantime, we were sure he could be a playmaking running back. We believed big things would happen if we gave Warwick touches, chances to get the ball through the rushing attempts, pass receptions, and punt and kickoff returns. We all agreed we wanted to draft Warwick Dunn. So here you have this kid coming out of Florida State, and he doesn't look necessarily like the typical NFL player. He doesn't fit the mold because he's just not big enough. But Tony Dungy has a current player, Derek Brooks, that's like, hey, you got to draft this guy. I played with him in college. He was amazing. Then Tony Dungy calls up the Florida State coach, Coach Bowden, and Coach Bowden says, right, that Warwick is the best player he'd ever coached. So even though this guy doesn't have the size, Tony Dungy's like, I think we should give him a chance because he could be a difference maker running back on our team. Our question then became where we would have to select him. Do we need to get him with our first pick at number 8, or could we get him with our second pick? Or, because of his size, could we trade down from our second pick and still get him even later in the first round? When the draft began, we found ourselves in a multi-party trade, with picks flying around everywhere. In the first round, we moved down from 8 to 12, but we also acquired the 16th pick. As for receivers, we were looking at 3 from the state of Florida. Ike Hilliard and Radel Anthony from the University of Florida, and Util Green from Miami. We also liked Ray Carthuth of Colorado. All had positive and negative qualities. Hilliard ran excellent routes and had solid hands, but didn't have Anthony's speed. Carruth had neither Anthony's speed nor Hilliard's hands, but was a nice mix of the two. Green had size and some great tools, but didn't seem as polished. After considerable debate, we entered the draft with our focus on Dunn first, and then one of the receivers. Hilliard was my favorite, but it wasn't a clear-cut decision for any of us. The Giants made that decision for us, taking Hilliard at the 7th pick. We still had 3 receivers we liked on the board, so we decided to shoot for Dunn with our first pick, with Tiki Barber of the University of Virginia as our fallback if Dunn was gone. Warwick Dunn was still available at 12, so we immediately sent the pick to our representative at the draft in New York. We were all excited about getting Warwick. Then we saw Util Green go to the Dolphins at 15, so we decided to take Radel Anthony at 16. We were thrilled with our first round, and in subsequent rounds we got some players who became solid starters over the next few years. One of these was our 3rd-round pick, Ron Barber, Tiki Barber's twin. I still have my draft notes, which show that we had some questions about Ron's tackling, which turned out to be unfounded. And note that our primary concern was that this would mark the first time the twins had been split. Both players obviously adjusted just fine during their careers in Tampa and New York, despite the separation. As coaches, we all felt good about the 1997 draft. So they're coming off this 1996 season, and yes, it's a losing season, but the culture of the Bucs has been changing, and Tony feels good at the end of that season in terms of the future. They go into the 1997 draft very optimistic. They draft Warwick Dunn, who they were really wanting to draft because they think he'll be a difference maker for them, and then they draft a few other guys, Radel Anthony, Ron Barber, and they think, okay, our team is looking pretty good right now. From the time our newly drafted players first took the field at minicamp, we were excited about the possibilities. It was still hard to see in the preseason what would happen. Our offense was still sputtering, but we felt we had significantly improved over 1996. To this day, that 1997 season remains my favorite in football. I remember every game from that season off the top of my head, in order, almost play by play. The 1997 season was everything I wanted for 1996 on my most optimistic of days. We played well, and the community became energized. We rode a wave of excitement and renewal that crested in a playoff appearance. People waited outside our locker room to call out to us and encourage us. The prior year, only our families had been there. The entire environment that year was special. I found that while life drags on when you're losing, it marches on when you're winning. I wanted the season to slow down so I could soak it up and enjoy it as long as possible. Not only was 1997 special for our team, it was a good year for my family as well. Lauren and I were having really fun discovering the Tampa Bay area. Like most of the staff, we rented a home in 1996 because we weren't sure what was going to happen with the old stadium. Now we were being told that we could expect a new stadium and that the team would be staying in Tampa, and everyone felt good about putting their roots down in the community. Lauren and I even began to build a home. In addition to being a great mom to our kids and helping them to develop as students, Lauren found plenty of opportunities to volunteer within the Tampa community. She especially enjoyed reading to kids at local elementary schools. Tiara, now 12, and Jamie, 10, were adjusting well as making new friends. Eric had just started kindergarten, so Lauren was able to get more involved with the Buccaneers women's organization. All in all, our family had really found a home in Tampa. We opened the season at home against the San Francisco 49ers, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, and company. The stadium was full, but not jammed. Al McGuire, the late Marquette basketball coach, said that he always used to check the corners of the arena for empty seats to see if a game was sold out. That has become a habit of mine during player introductions. On that day in the old Tampa Stadium, we had a good crowd, but the corners were still slightly empty. So they're having a good season in 1997, right? The Tampa Bay area is getting excited about this team finally, but they're still not having sold-out games, right? He was told, right, look to the corners, right? Those corner spots, the ones that aren't that great, if they're sold out, if there's people there, you got a good game. You got a sold-out crowd there. Steve Young left the game early with a concussion. Jerry Rice was injured on a hit by Warren Sapp. Warwick Dunn made a great run to put us in position for the go-ahead score. What a difference a year made. In 1996, we had opened at home against an upper echelon team and had gotten pounded. A year later, we opened against another top-tier team and won 13-6. I could feel confidence permeating our locker room. Just like the year before, we followed our season opener with 2 road games. These were both against NFC's central foes and places where the Bucks had historically had trouble winning. We shut down Barry Sanders in Detroit, and work done exploded on the turf in the Pontiac Silverdome, and was named the NFC's Offensive Player of the Week. That game also marked the first game in which I was assisted by my brother-in-law, Lauren Harris, my wife's twin. Lauren's job was to handle my headset cord. Coach's headsets hadn't yet gone wireless, and some had to manage the slack in the cord as the coach moved up and down the sideline. If my sons Jamie and Eric had finished their schoolwork for the week, I would let them assist me as well. They were usually pretty low-key about being the coach's sons, except for one particular game when the television cameras followed Jamie a lot. In fact, during the broadcast, John Madden even circled him on the telestrator for viewers. The next day at school, I think Jamie made the most of being a television celebrity. At the game in Detroit, Lauren was standing close behind me, holding the cord. When we scored, I felt a tug. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that Lauren was trying hard to restrain himself from cheering. I had nodded when we scored, but I was already moving on to what was next, and Lauren needed to keep up. But I kept feeling the cord pulling at my headset. Running off the field at halftime with a 17-3 lead, I looked at Lauren. He was trembling. "Are you all right?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know, Tony. I've got to let it out some." I laughed and thought, just like his twin. I told Lauren it was okay for him to express his feelings during the game, as long as he didn't yank my headset off. The following week, we played in the Metrodome in Minneapolis. Heading into the fourth quarter, we led the Vikings 21-6. On the third down with 7 yards to go, we gave the ball to Warwick on a draw play. All we needed to do was run down the clock, but that didn't stop Warwick from doing something spectacular. He made about 4 guys miss tackling him on a 52-yard run to the end zone. We were 3-0. As I walked to the 75 yards from the visitor's side of the field to the locker room, I thought about what I was going to say to the team. The players would be excited, with good reason. But I didn't want them to lose sight of the consistent, workmanlike habits that had gotten the team to that successful point. We prayed, as we always did after a game, and then I began. "Gentlemen, great job. But this was a business trip, and winning the game was simply what you were supposed to do. When you talk to the press, I want you to act like you expected this to happen." Suddenly, a phrase popped in my head, one I have continued to use ever since. "We'll celebrate on the plane, but when it lands, you got to focus on the next week." On the flight home, the whole team felt great. The Bucks had always struggled to win the big marquee games, but now we had just won 3 big games in a row. We had beaten 2 division opponents on the road, and we had beaten possibly the best team in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers, at home. What a great start to the season. So here they are, they're having a great season so far, and everyone's really excited, but Tony's like, we still got to make this business, right? You can't get too excited. You can't let your head go to these places like, oh, we're going to be amazing, we're going to beat everyone, right? It's that day by day, you got to stay focused. We played the Dolphins at home the following week with the game nationally televised on Sunday Night Football. This time, the corners of the stadium were completely full. I checked. So the fans are behind them now too, and they're playing to these sold-out crowds. One of the employees in the Bucks ticket office said a man walked up to the ticket window shortly before kickoff and was informed that the game was sold out. His jaw dropped, and he just stood there incredulous. "I can't believe it. I've been coming here for years and buying my ticket just before kickoff. It's never been an issue." I thought back to my 1996 claim that someday a Bucks game would be sold out. Back then, it had seemed too much to hope for. Now that claim had come true. Everything was perfect. We were playing against Dan Marino. The stadium was awash in our new team colors, pewter and red. We were on a roll. Due to injuries, we were missing 2 starters, defensive tackle Warren Sapp and linebacker Rufus Porter. But I told the team it didn't matter that those guys weren't playing. I said we would win if we played solid, fundamental defense. Do what we do. Warren later told me that I really upset him when I told the defense he was insignificant. He had hoped I would tell the defense they needed to rise up and play above their heads. "I didn't say you were insignificant, Warren. I'm sorry you didn't play. At the same time, I needed to get the message across. Our defense is about assignments, being willing to let the other guy make the play while you do your job. I don't want guys thinking in terms of making up for teammates who aren't there. I need the next guy to step in, knowing that we have confidence in him." Everybody played well. The offense carried us with 31 points, as Trent Dilfer and Mike Alstott had big games. I think the fans and some of the players were even more pumped up than they might have been because of Jimmy Johnson. Only a year earlier, he had chosen to coach at Miami rather than at Tampa Bay, in part because he thought he could get to a Super Bowl faster with Dan Marino and the Dolphins than he could with Trent Dilfer and the Buccaneers. With the Bucs' victory, the stadium was rocking. That game lit the fire of football in Tampa. It was the start of the enduring community support the Buccaneers are still accustomed to today. When I showed the players the tape of the stadium prior to kickoff, every seat was filled. I also showed them the kickoff of the poorly attended Seattle game in 1996 and pointed out what a difference they had made in only 1 year. We were scheduled to play Arizona the following week. We are informed by the league that if we beat Arizona, the Fox television network wanted to move the next game, which was against Green Bay, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. When the setting schedule, the league places the games of greatest interest, that is, the games between good teams, late Sunday afternoon or on Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football. In 1996, we had played every game on Sunday at 1 p.m. In 1997, we played during prime time. The Buccaneers had become a good team. Right, and that really is a tangible way of knowing if you've, quote unquote made it, or if the football world thinks that you've made it, is, when are your games being played? What time are they being played? What day are they being played? Okay, Buccaneers, they've made it in 1997. We beat Arizona to push our record to 5-0, a first for the Buccaneers since 1979 in the days of John McKay and Doug Williams. Next, we traveled to Green Bay to play the Packers at Lambeau Field. Clyde Christensen, who then was our tight ends coach, called my room early Sunday morning. Chapel was always held on Saturday night, so we had some extra time on Sunday before the 4 o'clock kickoff. Clyde suggested we take a walk through Appleton, Wisconsin, where our team was staying, to enjoy the October scenery. I agreed, and thus began a new tradition. Clyde and I had been going out for game day walks ever since. I welcome the exercise, but we do it more for the conversation. We've walked together all over the country and have never had a problem with fans. Usually we're not recognized, but even when we are, the comments are either positive or only jokingly hostile. Along the way, Clyde and I get a chance to share topics that are on our minds. Usually we discuss where we are at that time, both literally and with respect to the team's play. We also talk about what the Lord has been doing in our lives. So that's neat. He has this tradition where he takes a walk with Clyde Christensen, right, who is one of his coaches for the Buccaneers. And this is a game day walk they do every Sunday together. And I think it's, everyone has like their traditions or the little things they do before a game. And this is one of Tony's. And I think it really helps him kind of decompress and relax some before the stress of a game. That day in Wisconsin, we marveled at being 5-0 and playing the Packers, who were 3-2 and therefore 2 games behind us. We hoped they would be 3 games behind us by the end of the day. And like those days out in the Michigan lakes with my dad, we had a chance to reflect on the wonders of creation on that beautiful Wisconsin morning. Unfortunately, in the game that afternoon, we played more like the 1996 Bucks, which we thought we had left in the past, than like the 5-0 Bucks with the league's best record. We fell behind, battled back in an attempt to escape with a win despite ourselves, but ultimately lost to the Packers 21-16. The loss was a good reminder that we still weren't where we wanted to be. It was an extremely disappointing realization. Back in Tampa, we hosted Detroit and Minnesota, the 2 division rivals we'd beaten on the road in consecutive weeks during our 5-game winning streak. We lost both home games, scoring only 15 points total in 2 games. During that stretch, Michael Husted, our place kicker, missed several field goals. Michael's mother was battling cancer in the middle of the season, cancer that ultimately took her life. Michael was a very private person, and while the team knew about his mom, the press and the public were unaware of what he was dealing with. He was getting criticized for missing kicks, and I was getting criticized for not replacing him. It's not unusual. Fans seem to think players live in a vacuum, not subject to the same pressures and problems as the rest of us. They boo and yell their displeasure because a player is not playing up to their expectations. Michael never used his difficult personal problem as an excuse. He pushed ahead and held himself accountable for his performance. Kicking is a difficult task mentally at the best of times, and Michael really had his hands full during those days. Even though he was missing kicks he would ordinarily make, I decided I was not going to replace him. While this was hurting the team in the short run, I thought both Michael and the team would be better if we stuck with him. I was certain that we'd be better as a unit for standing behind one of our own members through a difficult time. I told the team during a meeting, Michael's going through some tough times on and off the field, but I don't care how many kicks he misses along the way. He will remain our kicker. If he misses, we'll need to rise up and get the ball back. But before it's all said and done, he's going to make some big kicks for us. Now that we had lost 3 games in a row, 2 of them at home, some of the naysayers understandably became more vocal. They had seen so many lean years in Tampa that as we headed back on the road at 5-3, they were certain we were the same old Bucks. Despite our fast start, they expected us to collapse over the second half of the season. We traveled to play the Colts in Indianapolis. We were ahead in the third quarter until the Colts scored 11 points to tie the game. Early in the fourth quarter, Mike Alstott fumbled on our own 18-yard line, and the Colts ran it in for a touchdown. We had already lost 3 straight games, and now we had been given up 18 straight points and were trailing in the fourth quarter on the road in a deafening dome. Trent Dilfer responded by marching us on a long drive for a touchdown to tie the score. Our defense held, and Carl Williams returned the Colts' punt across the 50-yard line. We were able to move the ball closer with our offense. With 11 seconds left, Michael Hested kicked a 36-yard field goal to win the game. That was an exciting victory and a pivotal moment for our team. Our players started to relax, realizing that we really had changed. We weren't the same old Bucks. We had faced adversity on the road, and we had done what we needed to do. In the years since then, Michael had expressed his appreciation for my sticking with him during that time. I didn't do anything special. I just treated him the way I would want to be treated. Even at the time, this made quite an impact on him and on the other players. Michael went on to kick well for the rest of the season. So he ends this chapter with an interesting story about the Buccaneers kicker, Michael Hested, whose mom was battling cancer during the season, and so he was just off his game, right? He had a lot on his mind. He wasn't playing well, and a lot of people would have pulled him because of that. But Tony didn't give up on him, and because he didn't give up on him, Michael goes on to have this great season, and the other players see, okay, our coach, he doesn't give up on people. He does truly believe in us. So he taught not only Michael a lesson through that, but the other players as well.